let's talk a little bit more about why Schumann in the broader sense of why include old music in a new music environment.
Right.
Or a festival that is wholly devoted to new music. Should there be old music?
Well, I think there's a larger institutional question, and if I can sort of summarize your position of one-time opposition to the idea of including canonical music, I think you proposed that there can be a kind of cynicism in programming extant or canonic work, in the sense of trying to sweeten the medicine, where if you just make it through this very thorny avant-garde stuff, we'll give you, something sweet to listen to at the end. And certainly that's a consideration with a lot of institutions. But on the other hand, I would make the argument very wholeheartedly that we're always in dialogue as composers with the past. And it would be a position of extreme hubris for any artist working in any medium to propose that his or her work is not in some kind of dialogue with work that has already been created, whether 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or 2 centuries ago. And that furthermore, for the listener, there is a great kind of edification that takes place when we're allowed to put it crudely, to A-B things, to listen to something that was written in 1839 or 1845, and then listen to something that was just created, because inevitably we will hear likenesses across the centuries. And I think that this is an incredibly valuable asset, both for the music of the past, where we hear new things, and particularly with someone like Schumann, where you take the opening song of Dichterliebe is so shocking, right? What is this chord that he's starting on that we will later find out is this sort of modified subdominant? But the first, 5...
In the wonderful month of May.
In the one, yeah. In wunderschönen Monat Mai. But if we can hear that opening in the context of it being brand new, if we can, through sort of priming ourselves in a sense with this new music, to hear this Schumann as new music, all of a sudden the opening of that work can be deeply, deeply shocking. And the way that song ends on this dominant chord, unresolved dominant, of course to our ears now there's nothing shocking about it at all. But I think that when programming is really successful, this kind of Catholic approach, we can hear things anew. I think that happens with composers who were really great visionaries. I think it can happen with Beethoven as well in some of the work, where what previously might have sounded staid to our ears suddenly becomes...
So in other words, you're pairing old with new, not as an apologetic way of giving something old to make bearable something new, but instead to present the old in a new perspective, as to help us in this new framework, in this new in this pairing with new music. Suddenly we approach the Schumann or whatever old music that's being presented as though it were never heard before, as though it were the first time it was being played.
Absolutely. And I think, in a more general sense, inevitably we experience things at once viscerally and in the moment, but also comparatively. And there is, of course, very much in our culture this impulse to assign a label to things, which can be very reductive. But I think inasmuch as that has become kind of ingrained in the way that we hear things, I think that to listen to 9 works by 9 very gifted composers in immediate juxtaposition with music that was written 150 years ago is going to inform both bodies of work. And I think that the danger of having a kind of monochromatic programming, either of music only from the past or only from the present, is that we're not really made able to draw those connections. And I think also, and this is something that perhaps you've brought up in the past, there's such a huge body of work that precedes this present moment, right? And so many strands going in so many different directions that it's hard, even given the inevitable subjectivity of receiving a work of art, there's just so much going on in so many different directions that I think that by giving a single reference point, we're all going to be responding to this music via this music and vice versa. It allows us, I think, to maybe focus our subjectivity in a way that the conversation can become maybe more productive, if that makes sense. Which is to say that if we have an evening of all new music, the conversation is so expansive and so broad. But if we frame that music with a very specific reference point from the past, all of a sudden we can have a tighter shot, as it were.
Is there a didactic element involved? Is it necessary to include this older music to somehow educate the listener? If we were to program as the focal point of a concert a Beethoven symphony, we wouldn't necessarily need to play music from the Renaissance, for example, to show the listener how we got to Beethoven. And yet, maybe I'm reaching too far here. But do you see my point?
Yeah, I do. But I think the idea is not that hearing Schumann is going to explain to us how we got to this moment. I think what I'm interested in is more the moment-to-moment sonic similarities and likenesses, or emotional likenesses that will emerge across centuries. And I think it's very important that that those connections are made between the present and the past, not the past and some previous past. Which is why I don't totally buy the Beethoven and Renaissance corollary. And as to the question of whether or not it's didactic, I think that there is a polemical element to this program that is inherent. I'm at once maybe trying to make a point and also trying to propose polemically that Schumann is pop music and my music is not pop music, and these songs that have been commissioned, well, what are they and does it matter? Let's just smear a whole bunch of ink on the canvas where the canvas is the piano and the voice and one person sitting at the piano and singing.
Do you think that all concerts are trying to achieve that?
No, well, I mean, and I should say, first and foremost, I want to present something that's beautiful and moving and intellectually stimulating, and I hope that this concert will achieve that. No, I don't think that every concert needs to have that kind of thrust by any means, and many don't. I think there's always a social element to presenting art, but I feel like Mata, given this sort of cultural space that Mata occupies, this concert seems like the right kind of venue for exploring these somewhat major questions about how we proceed as people who are making music more or less outside of the mainstream.
Do you think that your approach is different from other organizations that also try to have these disparate musics together in the same concert?
Well, I can't speak to intention, but I'm certainly aware that there are other organizations like Metropolis Ensemble and I think the Red Light Ensemble who have been programming, at least most recently I remember Mozart juxtaposed with contemporary works by young composers living in New York. Without attending those concerts, it's very difficult for me to say what is being achieved. I think there's been a lot of very, very intelligent programming at Zenkel Hall, up at Carnegie, through some of the Perspective series. Some juxtapositions which have been quite beautiful and quite illuminating, and others which have been less successful. And I think that, you know, the heart of this discussion is really about whether it is cynical to program music from the past, or whether it's edifying. And I don't know that we can ever really get to the heart of those questions.
Well, I suppose that one argument against it is that putting, let's say, a rock band with someone playing Chopin etudes with Shostakovich string quartet, the intention is a good one, but I feel that at a certain point we lose any sort of focus on what the larger picture may be.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're alluding to I think a very wonderful and ambitious concert series. But yes, there is this danger in these kinds of juxtapositions of losing a kind of focus. And it's in the same way that within a single work of art, we can draw on many things, but if we're not careful, it runs the risk of becoming pastiche. And I think that programming can become pastiche in the same way. There's an art to programming in the same way that there is an art to making art. The particularly tricky thing when we're programming new music and commissioned new music is that there's a huge gamble in juxtaposing, in this case, Schumann with a new song cycle, because at the point of constructing the program, I have no idea what any of this music sounds like. What gives me confidence and hope is the fact that there is this unifying principle of the single performer occupying these two roles.